of an introduction, but also thank you to the Disruptive Innovation Hub for inviting me, and probably most importantly, thank each one of you, for joining us and your interest in public policy, entrepreneurship, the energy transition, and the SARET scholarship. So, we meet here today at an hour of exponential change, of exponential information, connectivity, but also, yes, exponential disruption. We meet in an hour in our species history, where the decisions we make today in energy, in business, in technology, will have lasting impacts for the future of our species. The reality is that today exists, technology is advancing faster than most of us could comprehend. Our species today holds technological capabilities which could have only been imagined as the power of the gods to our ancestors. Every 2 years since 1965, the number of transistors on a microchip has doubled. Since the year 1990, the number of genome base pair sequences that can be sequenced for a single dollar has doubled every 3 months. And since 2000, the year 2000, the amount of solar energy capacity on the global grid has doubled every single year. The exponential technological advancement that is happening to our species are making breakthrough technologies that could solve the most daunting challenges of our time scarcely even imaginable on a horizon and time scale sooner than we can comprehend. And perhaps more incredibly, the same growth in technology has empowered a new generation of entrepreneurs, of do-it-yourself innovators that can achieve startling advances in everything from vehicle engineering to synthetic biology with scant resources and little manpower, so that innovation is no longer dependent upon massive corporations or national laboratories. Indeed, there has been a massive democratization of innovation. But we also stand and meet here in an hour of exponential disruption. We're facing the 6th mass extinction event of our planet, with 8% of global species already having gone extinct in the past century. A historic rise in mental health and substance abuse disorders, and unprecedented division and anger. And so, due to this rapid and seemingly unending disruption that's around every single corner, and the historic connectivity that we have, it's only too understandable the temptation to want to find simple solutions to complex problems, to find those who agree with your viewpoint and then block anybody else out, condemn them, unfollow them. Indeed, there's a rise of political movements across the world, on both the left and the right, whose simple solution is to demonize the other side. And so in this era of exponential progress, it's tempting to put your head in the sand. And there are those who say it is time to sit still, to take a rest. But the immense progress that our species has made was not built by those who waited and rested and wished to look behind them. This hour of unprecedented opportunity was conquered by those who move forward. And so it will be for the future of our species. If the history of progress teaches us anything, it is that our species, in our quest for knowledge and progress, is determined and cannot be deterred. The future of technology will go ahead, whether we join in it or not. And no one who expects to be a leader in the future can stay behind in this race. And so under this lens of exponential opportunity and exponential disruption brings us to perhaps the grandest opportunity and challenge of our time: the energy transition and climate change. Climate change is no longer some theoretical event happening sometime in the distant future. It is here, we can all feel it, and its effects are terrifying. while at the same time, the world will not willingly sacrifice the incredible progress that our species has made, which was only made possible by our access to abundant and affordable energy. A recent McKinsey report just published a couple of weeks ago calculated that the total cost and opportunity of the energy transition is $275 trillion worth of capital by 2050 to meet energy demand in a net zero future. This is a truly staggering cost and a truly staggering opportunity. And that is why I call it the energy transition is the Apollo project of our time. But it begs that question: what actually is energy? Any physicist will tell you that's easy. It's the ability to do work or create heat. But I think energy is much more than that. I think energy is the transformational tool that brought humanity out of the darkness. I mean this very literally. Think about it. Our best scientific evidence suggests our species existed for some several 100,000 years without the ability to create heat or light to break the darkness of night. Think about what that existence must have been like. One of the ancient myths tells a story of a gentleman named Prometheus, who climbs the famous Mount Olympus to steal fire from the gods, to only bring it back to humanity. But think about what Prometheus actually did. Armed with this new technology, our species wandered out of Africa for the first time and across the globe. We went into caves that we could now illuminate, and we created cave paintings and created art for the first time. And this new technology shaped how our species understood itself and interacted with each other. And so it was with the next breakthrough energy technology, when our species was able to harness and cultivate the power of animals to till crops and have more reliable sources of food. Known as the agrarian revolution, this new energy technology, our species was no longer subjugated to the uncertainty and vagaries of the hunt. We could make our own food, we could grow our own food. And with this new energy technology, civilization was born, cities were born, literature was born, which once again reshaped how our species thinks of itself and interacts with itself. And so it was with the next major step in energy innovation, coal. In the Industrial Revolution, the single largest economic advancement or step change our species has ever accomplished. Machines were invented, automation was invented, railroads were invented that could take us to new places faster than we ever thought possible. But so it is for us today. As we stand in this hour of exponential opportunity, where our species is able to travel to the stars, where we can take the entire history of knowledge our species has ever created and put it on a very tiny microchip, where we can solve medical ailments we never thought possible. But let's be clear about what energy innovation made this space age possible. It's been oil and gas. And so just as the Industrial Revolution came with incredible challenges from abhorrent working conditions and pollution, this new age also comes with responsibilities that we must challenge, and that is climate change. And so as we set sail on this new sea, let us be aware that we're doing so to find new opportunities, and that we have few choices but to take a leadership position in this as we grow, and that no source of energy has a conscience of its own. Whether it becomes a force of good or ill depends on us, and only us. And we must take a leadership position to help decide whether this new ocean will be a sea of peace or a new terrifying theater of fear. And finally, the energy transition in itself, while still in its infancy, has already created a great number of new companies and tens of thousands of new jobs in Canada. Think about what can be done now that we live in this era of exponential opportunity. We're just getting started on the energy transition. And so as you embark on this journey with the Disruptive Innovation Hub and the CERET Scholarship, remember that the only tool our species has ever really had that has brought us to this hour has been the indomitable spirit inside of each of us that has allowed us to overcome every obstacle and accomplish more than we've ever accomplished before. So remember that there's a leadership inside of each one of you. That true leadership listens to viewpoints you might disagree with and see the lens that they're looking at the reality with to find a new truth and a new opportunity for the future. The prize you're seeking, this CERET scholarship, might not only change your career, it could change the world. Just like Prometheus did when he climbed Mount Olympus, only to steal fire from the gods to give it to humanity. There is a new energy future. Let's go build it. You have everything you need if you have the courage to reach for it, the conviction to fight for it, and the kindness to share it. So let's go. Thanks for having me.
Kevin, thank you so much for inspiring discussion story. I asked you to be the keynote, also to bring your perspective of the issues that you think are important. Energy transition is probably one of the most important ones, and it's one that actually is right at the interface of environment, economy. So let me start by asking you a question. What do you think about the role of government in this, and what role government should play in facilitating the discussions and the actions that might come out of this? Because we're asking our students, if you were Prime Minister of Canada, what would you do? It'd be interesting to have your insights on some specific questions.
You know, put simply, I think the role of government is to cultivate an inclusive and value-creating environment for the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the doers to go and cultivate the future that we all collectively want. And this can be accomplished through a couple of means. There's the carrot approach and there's the stick approach. You know, my view is that Canada's actually been very good at the stick approach in energy. I think what we need is more carrots. You know, how can you generate an investment mechanism that can drive this? How can we unlock the required amount of risk capital that's going to be required to drive a lot of these new technologies? Canada is blessed with very generous granting sources for emerging technologies and entrepreneurs. We're getting our lunch eaten by the Americans on risk capital. My view is we need less grants for risk capital, and we need less grants for entrepreneurs, and we need far more risk capital in this country. Those would be my sort of high level views on you know, the role of government in the energy transition. But it's I think public policy is gonna have to shape it.
Can you just, I know that you were at COP26 in Glasgow, which was, you know, a focus on, I'm going to say, climate change, energy transition. Do you have any reflections that came out from that event about the challenges that we face? Because I know that you were a little surprised how little discourse there was and how much accusation there was.
Yeah, it was a little jarring, you know. Despite the fact that I'm actually technically not in oil and gas, I have obviously spent a career in oil and gas, and would walk into certain meetings where people would have to break out, you know, wooden crosses and garlic necklaces to have a conversation. And, you know, high level, my concern was that a lot of massive, audacious statements were made by politicians around the world with very little implications onto how we're actually going to do this. I came up with a term, NIMTO, for these politicians, not in my term of office. Oh yes, let's get this done by 2050. But you know, the last thing we're going to do is make any decision that might either inconvenience people's lives or, shave a 0.1% off of a GDP. As I was referencing the McKinsey report, this is a scale of investment we've never seen before. To put $275 trillion into perspective by 2050, that's half of global corporations' profit. This is not going to be cheap. We need to be thinking about how we can flip this into an opportunity. On the specifics around the energy transition, it was a little concerning to me how real 80% of global energy demand is currently being met by fossil fuels. Do you know what the percentage of global energy demand was being met by fossil fuels 50 years ago? 80%.
Okay.
So we need an all hands on deck solution to this, and to somehow suggest we're just going to take one energy system and flip it over for another energy system is ridiculous. We need to be focusing on how we lower emissions now with rational solutions and rational technologies in a way that is as economic as possible. And to have some sort of puritanical view on either side of this debate, the extreme will let's shut the industry down voices, or the planet's going to fry, or the let's just keep doing what we're doing and this is some hoax of the Chinese. Neither are true, neither are helpful. And that was what I was really referencing around a conversation of being able to listen to different viewpoints. We're not going to get there if, as soon as you add it up in the us versus them conversation, you're losing, and you're not making public policy that is going to have a lasting impact, because it will just get flipped over as soon as the next group gets in charge. That's not the type of leadership the future is going to need.
Right. So action, not policy statements.
Yeah. Actions that promote an inclusive path forward, as opposed to the tarring, feathering of the other side, whatever side you're on.
Yeah, it does seem politically that it's sometimes easier to tar and feather than to think beyond the next election.
And advantageous politically as well.
Yeah. So, you talk about the magnitude of the energy transition and the switch from, obviously you talk about the fact that we need to make oil and gas, I'm going to use the word cleaner without explaining what that means, but also that we need to actually find alternative ways to produce energy and to save energy. But that involves changing what people do, and there's a level of risk. Have you got some ideas on how we can help people that want to be more active in the energy transition, manage the transition from current state to future state, given there's a level of uncertainty about technologies and government policies and carbon markets and all of those things?
Yeah, I'd first say just jump in, get engaged. There's tremendous amount of sustainability and energy transition initiatives across the country. Get involved and go into them, but have a almost childlike curiosity of why does somebody think this way? And so you can avoid these traps, these simplistic traps of them, me, my group is good, that group is bad. And look at the technologies I think that are going to be making a meaningful and profound impact. Secondarily, start thinking about ways that actually can impact things. My view is the success in the energy transition is going to we're going to require an innovation that is basically delivers the same quality of life that we have, that is cheaper, better, and simpler than what we're currently doing. And that's not apparent at this time, how we get there. Somebody that figures that out, as Bill Gates has been recently saying, that the energy transition presents the opportunity of creating 5 or 10 to 15 of the next Teslas. How are we going to get there, and go and jump in. That would be my answer to that.
So a very specific question, and I'm going to ask you specifically for a reasonably short answer. You did that, right? You jumped in from a company in the oil industry to create Avatar Innovations. Can you just explain, number one, your motivation, just very briefly, what it does? People can obviously go look at the website if they want more details.
Yeah, put simply, Avatar Innovations is a corporate innovation partner that works inside oil and gas to unlock energy transition technologies and leaders for the future. So the model is we take hundreds of emerging leaders from across Canada, the US, and the UK. They work together on generating new technologies and solutions while fully employed by an energy major. So it gives the energy majors the nimbleness of a startup looking at new technologies, but it also gives the startup the horsepower of a large cap if they figure out a new technology.
So thank you. And I think one thing that I never really thought about, but before I got involved with Avatar, is, you know, the motivation of all of these, you know, I'm going to call it mid-level, mid-career, I'm going to say particularly engineers, but obviously business analysts and all sorts of people inside the energy industry. I mean, I get the feeling that there's, and having met a bunch of them through the first program, there's a real desire by them as individuals to change maybe even faster than their parent organizations can.
Yes, well, you know, as I mentioned, in this era of exponential change, like put it in perspective, the iPhone was invented like 11 years ago. That's really not that long, and think about how much it's fundamentally changed us. But as I mentioned, today we're using 80% fossil fuels for energy mix, and 50, 70 years ago we were using 80% fossil fuels in our energy mix. So there is understandably this feeling that the energy transition is not going fast enough. But it's a ridiculously difficult and complex issue for us to solve that is going to go slower than a new app or a new digital innovation that can iterate so much faster, versus when you're comparing it to trillions of dollars of hard infrastructure that are deployed around the world, delivering the current energy systems that we have. And so, but I think also what Avatar does is it provides people an opportunity to realize that, you know, new technology and emerging technologies, bringing them to market and scale, it's hard. And so what we try and do at Avatar is de-risk that entrepreneurial journey by providing them, you know, they can stay working at their companies while they participate in Avatar. So we can de-risk the entrepreneurial journey, as opposed to, you know, setting 5-10 years on your life on emerging energy technology that might not work.
Absolutely. I think, you know, I think it's very interesting. I'm going to say I've been at the forefront of the change, but maybe I've been causing it. I don't know. You know, when I graduated from engineering school, I went to work for General Electric in England, which was not the same as General Electric America, but was the UK's largest private company, 200,000 employees. And when I arrived in the department I went into, the average amount of time people that worked there was 25 years. And there was just an assumption that you would come there and you'd work there for the rest of your life. And so it was like, go to school, go to university, get a good degree, get a job, and the company will look after you. And then, you know, without going through all my own circumstances, that radically changed. And the future was very different. And one of the things that you kind of recognize is companies, big companies, most big companies, there are a couple of exceptions, move slowly. They've been designed to move slowly. They make decisions slowly. They've been designed to be risk averse, which means that a lot of the future has to be driven by, you know, the unreasonable thing. George Bernard Shaw said it, you know, progress is made by the unreasonable person. So being unreasonable, thinking through, building collaboration, building cohorts, building community, and then being empowered. And I think in addition to the democratization of technology, despite your comments about venture capital, which I absolutely agree, we've also seen the democratization of access to capital through, you know, crowdsourcing and other types of funding. So the world is changing, and I think we're excited, both as CIFAL and BEST, to create a generation of thought leaders who will actually come up with innovative ideas for discussing these issues. A more simple and pragmatic question. Other technologies you like other technologies that maybe people here haven't heard of, that you think are going to be game changing?
There is, I can give you some kind of quick short wins, and I can give you some medium wins, and I can give you some longer term wins. You know, the quick short wins is methane emissions reductions technology. It's methane is 85 or I think 81, some number like that, times more potent of a CO2 or greenhouse gas molecule than CO2. There's some pretty exciting stuff there, and methane is not just an oil and gas problem. It's actually largely an ag problem. How can we start tracking, monitoring, and getting that down? And I think that will have some immediate wins around at least managing the kind of energy transition. Obviously, hydrogen is something I'm super excited, but I think there's obviously a lot more of a longer term path. Biofuels is something that is super exciting to me. Where biofuels I think eventually start going is not necessarily so much on figuring out how we can put more biomass, if you will, into the biofuel world, but also where I think it starts going, and some of the groups are working on, is basically what is now carbon removal technologies. Can you take a CO2 molecule out of the atmosphere, break off the carbon molecule and add a hydrogen molecule, and sort of start having carbon negative, if you will, fuels, which I think is pretty exciting. There's a variety of groups working on that. I think carbon capture is like an absolute necessity for us to figure out and how we get going. Not just for current energy production, but also the sectors that are virtually impossible to take carbon negative, like steel production. And then super excited with fusion energy. There's the ITER plants in Europe. That's instead of basically the power of the sun. We can do it commercially. We can prove that we can do it. Challenges is we can't. Sometimes takes more energy than it actually releases, so we have to figure out how we can scale it. But that's probably fusion's always been 30 years away, but I actually think it is probably 30 years away now.
So a question, I'm going to be asking you as a prime minister question. Should we pick which of those technologies to focus on and try to be world leaders in them? Or should we let them evolve, or should we let them be driven by the big industry using them? I mean, how do we need to make a strategic choice, or do we just let the market take care of things?
I think to actually get to a net zero future, we're unfortunately going to have to start picking leading horses, but I don't think we necessarily need to pick winners. But I say by picking leading horses would be to create investment framework where we can drive investment into a suite of solutions, as opposed to picking one and just giving it money. How can you de-risk it to the point that companies have enough of a carrot to start investing in it, consumers have enough of a carrot to start investing in it, but having a sort of suite of options. And then the other piece of it I would actually have to start thinking of it is this is going to start looking like big infrastructure. And the reality is currently 80% of global oil production comes from state-owned companies, the Saudi Aramcos of the world. So how do we look at infrastructure? And I think there you might need some public-private policies on actually being able to build these types of mobility systems. And then I guess thirdly is obviously somewhere I think Canada has a huge gap compared to the Americans, is around risk capital. You mentioned the democratization of it. We don't need individual investors. We need trillions of dollars worth of risk capital. To be frank, there's a fund structure that's used in tech called VICI, the Venture Capital Catalyst Investment Structures, where government basically takes a first in, last out approach to guarantee a private investor hurdle rate. It's been very successful in tech. Could we use something like that in energy transition? Those I think would be the big three areas. If you look at the stick approaches that are sort of being taken around the world, like the banning of single-use plastics, the banning of flights shorter than 2 hours, those are really tinkering around the edges on fundamental energy supply. We need bold transformative action now.
Thank you. So I have an interesting question from Professor Asagari. I'm going to put it in my words, not his. So When we teach creative problem solving at the university, we always say there are three ways to solve a problem. One is technology. You have the technology, identify the problem and address it. You can, for example, make sure that your car can't go faster than 100 kilometers an hour. The second way that we do it is behavioral. We educate people. If you drive faster than this, you're very likely to get in an accident, or you can put yourself at risk or other people at risk. It's the educational. And the third one is economic, where you say, if you go faster, we'll fine you. And we've seen all of those together. We've spent a lot of time talking about technology solutions. And as an engineer, I'm always going to talk about technology over the other two. But have you thoughts on how we change the behaviors of people? And is our focus on individuals or organizations, or at the higher level society?
Changing the behavior of the consumer, that would be the holy grail in terms of solving climate change, wouldn't it? But it's the challenge of it is, it's again that trap that I think that we all fall, that the world is falling into. Well, it's not my fault, it's their fault. Or I'm going to do what I want, and the scale and challenge of it just seems so immense. So why am I going to change what I'm doing, or let alone make a sacrifice? I think you're starting to see some changes in human behavior in that regard, but I think it stems from that cultivation of what I'll call loosely as inclusion, the ability of listening to someone you vehemently disagree with. That's the skill set we need. And in this world of unprecedented disruption, as I said, the easiest thing to do is just find the people that you like, unblock and unfollow everybody you don't like, so you never hear their perspectives, and these camps just get further and further apart to the point that they're starting to deal with almost two separate facts. That's the type of leadership we need to be cultivating as a society. Otherwise, I think the outcomes are really terrifying.
We look a lot at big data and AI to control things. Do you see that area of technology playing a role in the energy transition? Are you seeing areas where better information is going to help us make better decisions, or automate better decisions?
Yeah, so I see, like, there's almost this like tendency to like look at AI and ML as this sort of like pixie dust that we can just like sprinkle on some inefficient system or uneconomic business and somehow magically make it better or economic. An easy way I think about like AI is to think about like a radio. And this is the radio, you've got the volume and you've got the tuner. Everybody wants the AI to be the volume, but it's actually more the tuner to be able for us to get right on the exact data point that we actually want. And that's, I think, where excitement is going to be guided. And I think for the foreseeable future, that's a smart way to be thinking about AI, to be driving the automation systems that we're going to be needing. But if we get that piece right, then yeah, I do think that we'll get to a point as a species where we can start solving a lot of the meaningless tasks or work heavy tasks to allow the parts of our brain to explore the creative aspects of it. If you think about, like, there's a number of anthropological studies that have been done that, if you looked at, the hunter-forager, evolutionary early sequence of humans, it basically would take them 2 hours a day to hunt and forage for enough food. What did they do with the rest of that day? What social and community aspects were sort of being developed? And so, can we get back to that point as a species where we can flourish on the creative aspects of ourselves? That could be a goal in the optimistic exponential opportunities that we face.
Absolutely, thank you. And I think I like your analogy of volume and the tuner, although it's probably buttons now, not rotary dials.
I'm dating myself here, Andrew.
Yeah, well, we used to have to wind them up in the So we have some good, really interesting questions from people on the call. So I'm going to ask them and just identify who they are. So Adrian made a comment, which is a really interesting one, which he said, the recent ASEAN outlook for zero carbon energy, a concern was raised because there are a whole amount of infrastructure around coal power plants that have already been built and are already operating, and therefore have, you know, a sunk cost, if you like, and they only have to pay the operating costs. But the competition, if we're trying to create renewable energy, and we're having to pay for the capital cost up front. Have you got any thoughts on that, and any ways that we can focus on maybe making those coal-fired plants more, well, contribute less to the sustainability problem?
Yeah, so like legacy assets, if you will. You know, I'd say that the encouraging news is that you know, you've even seen China now ban you know, at least the international funding and construction of new coal plants. You know, you've got the Glasgow Financial Alliance, or GFANZ, you know, 60-70% of global capital basically saying they won't fund these types of new projects. So I don't think that they'll be going, and the reality is solar and wind now competes without subsidies to that, and without even a carbon tax. So there's been an exponential drop in those types of prices that is going to start fluctuating the market. Where the challenge is really, first of all, grid resilience on that, and energy storage. You know, we're going to start facing massive critical mineral shortages that's going to change the economics of energy storage. We can't just put batteries on everything. You know, what is the role of subsurface in that as an energy transition asset? You know, so yeah, I would say there is not a jurisdiction in the world that is not looking at how to retire those assets in some sort of phase, but it's going to have to be the market that wins it. You know, if you see now, you know, exploding energy prices in Europe, exploding energy prices here in North America, what's the cost of this going to be? How do we do this as economically as possible? I don't know if that answers the question, but if you want to follow up, Adrian, I'm happy to.
I think, yeah. So if there's another one that comes through, I can see on the follow-ups. Let me just change tack a little bit. And I think, you know, Canada is a country that really has, I think, a leading role in the world on some of these issues. Maybe should be more of a leader, and maybe have an opinion on that. But if we look at the energy transition, some countries, you know, notably, I'm going to say China, are actually well placed to address them. Whether they're doing it or not is another question. But other countries, like, for example, India, have a challenge that they, you know, not as economically strong, but they have a big role to play in the energy transition. Have you got any thoughts on how we can try and solve the, I'm going to say, international inequality between different economies and regions? Because at the end of the day, climate change impacts everybody, not just one country over another.
Yeah, and I actually think the net zero future is actually not a developed country challenge or question. It's, I think, a developing country challenge. You know, historically, the economic growth was tied to carbon. Every dollar in economic growth would equal a linear contribution of carbon to the atmosphere because they're using more energy. The West has in developed world has broken that, and emissions are actually reducing across the West. You know, fast enough is the debate, but where it's rising is obviously developing countries and red hot economies like India and China. And, you know, from their perspective, they're like, okay, you guys built your entire economies on basically, you know, free carbon heavy carbon heavy energy without a cost for carbon. Now you guys are saying, now that we've gotten our acts together, or now that we're actually finally making meaningful progress on economic development, bringing billions of people out of poverty, now you tell us we can't use the same form of energy you guys used. And then they also see negotiating partners who are not getting stuff done. You know, if I was India and asked to commit to a 2050 emissions target, and I was looking at the Americans who, you know, every election cycle will dramatically change their position on it, I'd say I'm negotiating with an unreliable negotiating partner, and I'm not going to make that question, or I'm not going to answer it in that way. But what I will say, where my optimism does lie on this, is as these billions have been brought out of poverty in the past 10, 20 years, they have access to the same technology and entrepreneurship that we're starting to see democratized solutions here. So as the world standard of living increases, you've got basically the billions of new potential entrepreneurs that are going to have access to the same entrepreneurial tools and technologies that have democratized innovation in the rest of the world, that can potentially go and solve these. You know, the reality is you know, the effects of climate change in a country like India, like Mumbai is basically already underwater. You know, how are they going to manage a city of 30 million if sea levels even rise half a meter? The effects are huge, but I'm optimistic that these tools will enable and benefit.
So thank you so much. So I have two questions for you. One, I'm going to ask you about the title of your presentation, and the final one that you can be thinking about for after the short video I'm going to show is what would you do if you were Prime Minister? Where would you start if you were Prime Minister of Canada? But the first one is around where do you how realistic do you think it is to reach the climate change goals that we keep establish? I mean, you made a comment before about not on my term, and that's always been a favorite comment. By the way, it works in corporations too. When I was in corporations, I used to be told that don't worry, your job in the big company's only there for 3 years. You have a year to fix what the other people did. You have a year to work out what you're doing, and a year to tell people what you're doing, and then you leave for the next promotion, and you never actually have to do anything. So I think it happens in companies and in politics. Do you think it's realistic? Do you think it's realistic to achieve some of the goals that we're setting, or are we setting targets that are just unrealistic in the hope that we don't actually have to deliver on them?
It's going to be tough, but I do think that it is realistic. You know, the reason I chose, you know, the Apollo project over time is, you know, that was a daunting feat of engineering, of technology that didn't exist, massive amounts of ridiculous amount of capital. Like, it's at some point the Americans were spending like something like 20% of GDP on this space race. That's the type of initiative we need, and I think our species has proven we can accomplish those types of things. But how they did it was by unifying all the different domains of the economy of the public towards solving perhaps the greatest ambition of our species. But what could be, while this exploration of space captivates the imagination of our species in a way that we haven't before, what could captivate the imagination of our species more than a sustainable future? And that's, I think, the message that the politicians need to be hammering. And frankly, one I'm not seeing from either the right or the left, of the easier trap is just to sort of condemn the other side.
Absolutely. So just because, you know, I'm old enough to remember the original speech and old enough to remember staying up at night to watch the first landing on the moon in '69. Can you just very briefly tell people what the Apollo mission was about? And then I am going to play that video clip that I shared with you before.
Yes, the Apollo mission was, you know, really the stated ambition of the Americans to be the first on the moon. You know, the space race had sort of been started. You know, rocket technology had gone, and, you know, the presidents of the United States in the 60s, JFK, made a very ambitious goal of, that by the end of the decade, they would make it to the moon. And what seemed an absolutely audacious and ridiculous statement for a politician to make, especially if you put that in light of statements our politicians are making today, they did it. And that's the type of, I think, leadership and thinking that we need to start seeing from our politicians today on, arguably a much bigger task.
Thank you. So I'm going to, I think that it's, getting the country around a mission that's going to be difficult. And I think that, we need to come together rather than kind of fight in opposite corners. So just for inspiration, I always use this short video clip in my communications class. Hopefully it will work here. Can you guys see it? Yeah.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win, and the others too.
So I think you just highlighted why you chose Apollo as the theme. It very much aligns with the idea that if you were Prime Minister, what could you do? So if you were Prime Minister, that's kind of the final question for today, is if you were Prime Minister, where would you start? What would you do first?
I think it starts with a certain humility. It starts with a bold vision of a bold, inclusive vision for what this future looks like, and that has the patience to listen to the other side. That's where it has to start. That's the only place it can start. And then thinking about the tools and the technology, or tools that a government has at its disposal to make sure that in this transition, people are included. And change is hard and change is terrifying. But it comes from patience and humility, I guess would be. There's a reason I never go into politics, but I work with many politicians from all political stripes, and that is the message I deliver to all of them. Is let's stop finding simple means of division. Let's stop trying to take complex solutions into simple sound bites. And have the courage to last a little bit past your term.
Yeah, it's hard to do that in the political world sometimes, but we have seen leaders do it. So I'm just gonna. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm just going to end with a couple of bits of information. I hope people can see this. So as I mentioned earlier on, this is the first and opening keynote speech. We have a number of notable people. In fact, we had so many that we've had to combine two on the last one, talking about climate solutions, sustainability, is the economy stupid, transition to environmental sustainability, and what do we have to do to solve the climate crisis. And we have a range of people, from practical experts to venture capitalists to global scholars from York University and from across the world. This speaker series is certainly not intended to be just for York. It's meant to be for students across Canada. And so we will be highlighting, so we'll be sharing the recording of the video on the two websites, the Disruptive Innovation Hub website and also the CIFAL site, along with all of the other videos. And we encourage you, if you've enjoyed this, to come to the next one, which is next week, same bat channel, same bat time. Sorry, I'm old enough to remember that when they used to have advertised Batman. And also tell your friends, especially if you have students in universities in Canada, tell them about the speaker series, tell them about how we're doing and what we're doing, tell them about the scholarship. And of course, I could keep it all secret and just tell my students and then they'd win, but I think that would be a hollow victory, and it wouldn't be a very good one. So, competition will help us all rise to the challenge. Professor Asghari, do you have anything finally to say?
Yes, thank you very much. This was very, very interesting discussion, and I enjoyed the answers to all the questions. And thank you very much, Kevin, for being with us, considering your busy time. And everyone else, thank you for joining us. This was a great discussions, and we are looking forward to future events. And as you highlighted, it is just the beginning of this type of discussions. Moving forward, we have a lot more to talk and discuss through these dialogue sessions from different angles. Definitely energy transformation is one of the key, because it has a lot of links with other economic sectors in the economy here in Canada, as well as other places. In other sessions, we go into other aspects of the same questions and challenge that we have. And again, thank you very much, and looking forward to contributions from all the participants as well. They had very good questions indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We will print out the chat, so if there are any questions, we'll circulate them, and maybe we'll try to post some of those answers. I think there were a couple of people that were disappointed when they found they couldn't actually win the prize. We didn't make up the scholarship or the rules, so I just apologize. But as they said, we can build a body of knowledge and sharing and shared ideas. So we will try to find a way to create some discussions on the website so that you can continue to inform and raise questions that you might want to end up, if you are entering the competition, into your essay.
But so, I just want to add, Andrew, that yes, those who cannot participate in the contest probably can support those who are. And that is why we are all here as well. We want to support those who can apply. And finally, thank you, Andrew, for hosting this, and thank you, Shirin, for the introduction and opening. Thank you.
Yeah, just to agree with that, if you put your name in the chat or send a message to us afterwards that you are not a student at a Canadian university, any student at a Canadian university, which is the only eligibility requirement, but you'd like to contribute, then we can kind of circulate that within our community. And when maybe you can find a student to work with or to collaborate, there's no rules that say you cannot get great ideas and inputs from friends and colleagues around the world. So thank you. Kevin, thank you for your time today. Ali, thank you so much. Shireen, thanks for all the work. Omid, Victoria, all of the people behind the scenes that made it happen. Thank you. And thanks for what is a really great start to the conversation, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, and good luck, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.